I remember the day so vividly, as if it was burned into my memory. It was a warm summer afternoon in North Dakota when Jason and I decided to do something crazy: climb the old broadcasting tower just outside of town. We had talked about it for months. Jason, my best friend since high school, had been obsessed with urban climbing videos, the kind where people scale skyscrapers without permission. I wasn't as fearless as him, but his excitement was contagious. We had barely any gear: a cheap harness each, a couple of carabiners, and a single length of rope. Not enough for a proper climb, but enough for us to feel brave. When we reached the base of the tower, I craned my neck upward. The structure stretched endlessly into the blue sky, the steel glinting in the sun. 628 meters, Jason said with a grin. Almost twice the Eiffel Tower. You ready? I hesitated, my stomach tightening. We shouldn't do this. But Jason just slapped my shoulder. We've come this far. No one's around. We'll be fine. And so we started climbing, rung by rung, hearts pounding, the world below shrinking until the ground looked like a patchwork of fields and dusty roads. At first, it felt exhilarating. The wind rushed past my face, and the metal rungs were warm under my hands. But the higher we climbed, the more the tower swayed, and the more real the danger became. By the time we passed what felt like halfway, the air had changed. The warm breeze had turned into sharp, cold gusts that howled through the metal beams. My fingers were starting to ache from gripping the ladder. Jason laughed nervously. "Man, we are high! Don't look down!" Of course I looked down. The ground seemed impossibly far away. The trucks on the highway were little more than ants crawling along a thin gray line. My head spun, and I clung to the rung until my knuckles turned white. Then it happened. One of our cheap carabiners slipped from Jason's harness and clattered against the metal before vanishing into the void below. "Damn it!" Jason swore, his voice almost lost in the wind. "That was my backup clip," he muttered. I could feel my chest tighten. We had brought so little gear already. Losing anything meant we were even more vulnerable. As we climbed higher, clouds began gathering on the horizon. Dark, heavy clouds. The wind grew stronger, making the tower groan and sway. "This doesn't feel safe anymore," I shouted over the wind. Jason hesitated for the first time. "Let's just reach the platform near the top and rest. We'll come down after that." "Promise." I wanted to argue, but there was no way to climb down safely while the gusts were this strong. So we kept going, our movements slower, more deliberate, every rung feeling like it could be the last. When we finally hauled ourselves onto the small maintenance platform near the top, I collapsed against the steel railing, chest heaving. The view was breathtaking. Endless plains stretched in every direction, but there was no sense of safety. Jason sat down beside me, wiping sweat from his brow. "See? Not so bad," he said, though his voice was trembling. Then the first raindrop hit my cheek. Within minutes, the drizzle turned into a full-on downpour. The metal became slick beneath our hands and feet. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low, rumbling thunder. "This is bad," I said. "Really bad." Jason nodded, his usual grin gone. "We waited out here. No way we can climb down in this." We crouched under the flimsy railing, trying to shield ourselves from the rain. Our cheap backpacks with our food, water, and the rest of the gear were not waterproof. I watched in horror as one of Jason's bags slid across the platform, caught by the wind, and tumbled off into the void. "My water!" he shouted, leaning dangerously close to the edge. I grabbed him by the harness and yanked him back. Hours passed. The storm didn't stop. The sun went down and we were left shivering in the dark, soaked to the bone. The tower swayed gently with every gust of wind, making me feel like we were on a ship in a storm. The idea of climbing down in the dark was unthinkable. That first night on the platform, with hunger gnawing at my stomach and the sound of thunder all around us, I realized something terrifying. We were trapped. By the second day, the storm had calmed, but the wind never stopped. It cut through our wet clothes, chilling us to the bone. The sun baked the metal during the day, but at night it felt like we were sitting in a freezer. We inventoried what little we had left. Half a protein bar in my pocket, a single bottle of water between us, no spare rope, no proper shelter. Jason tried to stay upbeat. We'll climb down today, just need to wait for the metal to dry. But when we started the descent, a sudden gust nearly ripped me from the ladder. My hands slipped and my heart stopped as my feet dangled over empty air. Jason grabbed my arm and pulled me back to the platform. "No way," he said, breathing hard. "If you fall, there's no saving you. We wait until it's calmer." So we waited. The hours stretched endlessly. Hunger twisted my stomach. Jason complained he needed to use the bathroom, but there was nowhere to go. In the end, he had to lean over the edge, and I could tell the humiliation was eating at him. At one point, a large bird landed on the railing, curious about us. Jason tried to shoo it away, but the creature snagged the last piece of our protein bar in its beak and flew off. Jason cursed loudly, kicking the metal floor. I just stared after the bird, stunned. "That was our last food," I whispered. That night, lying on the cold steel with my back pressed against the railing, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the tower, every gust of wind felt like it was coming to throw us off. Jason finally muttered, "What if no one ever finds us?" I didn't answer, because for the first time, I was starting to wonder the same thing. By the third day, the tower felt like a prison. The sun came out in full force, baking the steel and turning the platform into an oven. Our lips were cracked, and the single bottle of water was nearly empty. Jason stood and shouted into the wind, "Hey, anyone out there, help!" His voice echoed across the empty plains, but there was no answer. He tried again and again until his voice was hoarse. Finally, he sat down hard, burying his face in his hands. "No one's coming," he whispered. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to say something comforting, but nothing came. The silence between us was heavier than the air. By late afternoon, we tried again to climb down, moving painfully slow, gripping each rung as if it was our last. But halfway down, another gust hit. The ladder shook, and Jason's foot slipped. For a heart-stopping moment, he dangled by one arm. "Jason!" I screamed, reaching for him. He managed to swing back onto the ladder, panting and pale. "No," he said, climbing back up toward the platform. "We'll die if we keep going now." Back on the platform, we sat in silence, too drained to talk. My stomach growled loudly, and Jason let out a short, humorless laugh. "You ever think this would be how we go? Starving on top of the world?" I didn't laugh, because now it felt real. That night, lightning flickered again on the horizon. The thought of another storm made me shiver. My mind kept drifting to dark places, wondering if I'd ever see my family again. And for the first time, I caught Jason crying quietly in the dark. Morning came like a cruel joke. The sky was cloudless, the sun already scorching. My head throbbed from dehydration, and every movement made me dizzy. Jason tore a strip from his shirt and tied it around his forehead, trying to keep sweat from stinging his eyes. "We have to find water," he muttered, staring at the endless land below. "Where?" I croaked. "There's nothing out there." He did. Instead, he stood, rummaging through his small backpack. He pulled out the last granola bar we had been saving. "Split it," I said. Jason stared at it for a moment, then broke it in half. His hands trembled as he passed me my share. We chewed slowly, as if we could trick our bodies into thinking it was enough. A shadow crossed above us. At first, I thought it was a cloud, but then I saw wings. A huge bird circled, then swooped. "Hey!" Jason yelled, waving his arms. The bird dived again, this time snatching Jason's baseball cap, the one he'd worn since high school. "No!" he shouted as the bird flew away with it. It was such a small thing, but it broke something in him. He threw what was left of his granola bar off the tower and screamed, a raw sound full of rage and fear. "We're gonna die here," he yelled. "Don't you get it? No one even knows we're up here." I grabbed his arm. "Stop it, you're scaring me." Jason stared at me, breathing hard, then turned away, silent. By evening, we were both too weak to fight anymore. We lay side by side on the hot steel, watching the sky turn red. I prayed quietly, whispering words I hadn't said since I was a kid. "God, if you're out there, please." And for a brief moment, as the wind cooled and the stars appeared, I felt something. A strange peace, like a hand on my shoulder. But morning would bring a new nightmare. At dawn, the wind picked up. It wasn't gentle anymore. It howled through the tower, making the steel vibrate under us like a giant tuning fork. Jason was shivering, though it wasn't cold. His lips were cracked and pale. "We have to climb down," he said hoarsely. "If we stay, we die." He was right. Staying meant waiting for death. But climbing down with no energy, no gear, no safety, that could kill us faster. We started descending. The tower seemed twice as tall going down as it had going up. Each rung felt slippery, and my arms burned with every movement. Halfway down, Jason's foot slipped. I heard the metallic screech of his boot sliding. "Jason!" I screamed. For a split second, he dangled with one hand gripping the steel. His backpack swung violently, threatening to pull him off. "Hold on!" I shouted, reaching down toward him. "I can't," he grunted, straining. His face twisted in pain. I braced my legs and grabbed his wrist, just as his grip gave out. The jolt nearly ripped my shoulder from its socket, but I didn't let go. "Climb! Climb back up!" I yelled through gritted teeth. Somehow, with a surge of adrenaline, Jason found the strength to hook his foot on the rung and pull himself back. When we both stopped to breathe, neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Jason said quietly, "You just saved my life." I nodded, but inside, I felt the creeping terror grow stronger. We still had so far to go, and now every step felt like it could be the last. The tower groaned as the wind pushed harder. I didn't know if we'd make it. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a strange bruised color, purple and gray mixing like spilled ink. Jason looked up. "That's not good." The first rumble of thunder shook the air. We froze. Lightning and a 628-meter metal tower were the worst possible combination. "We have to find shelter," I said, scanning desperately. But where could we hide? There was nothing but steel rungs and empty sky. The wind roared and then the rain came. Cold, sharp needles cutting into our faces. Our hands slipped on the wet metal as we scrambled back up to the small platform we'd passed earlier. By the time we reached it, lightning was everywhere, stabbing the earth miles away, lighting up the fields in white flashes. Each flash made the tower glow, humming with energy. We crouched low, holding on with both hands, praying the next strike wouldn't find us. The smell of ozone was so strong it burned my nose. Jason's breathing was ragged. "We're gonna die here," he shouted over the thunder. "No," I yelled back. "Not today." The storm raged for what felt like hours, though it was probably less than one. Each minute felt like a coin toss between life and death. Finally, the lightning moved farther away, the thunder rolling more softly. Rain still poured, but we were alive. Jason laughed, a shaky, half-hysterical sound. "We just survived being the tallest lightning rod in North Dakota," he said. But even as I laughed with him, I felt my muscles ache and my stomach twist with hunger. Surviving one more storm didn't mean we'd make it through the next night. The storm left everything soaked, including us. Our clothes clung to our skin, chilling us to the bone even though the air wasn't freezing. Jason's hands trembled as he dug into his backpack. Inside was our last ration, a single protein bar, smashed but still edible. "We split it," he said, tearing the wrapper with his teeth. The smell hit me like a punch. My stomach cramped so hard I almost doubled over. I reached out, and that's when it happened. A shadow swooped down from above. A hawk, massive and fast, snatched the bar straight from Jason's hand and flew off. "No!" Jason screamed, throwing a rock after it. His voice cracked with rage and despair. I just stared. That tiny bar had been our last hope. Without food, every rung we climbed or descended would take twice as much from our bodies. Jason collapsed back against the metal frame, breathing hard. "This tower's gonna kill us," he whispered. I didn't know what to say. The hunger, the cold, the isolation, it was eating away at both of us. That night we huddled on the narrow platform, stomachs growling so loud it felt like the tower could hear us. Sleep came in short, haunted bursts. I dreamed of warm kitchens and fried eggs. When I woke, Jason was staring blankly into the distance, his eyes hollow. We both knew we couldn't stay much longer, but the thought of climbing down again terrified us. The tower seemed endless, the ground impossibly far, and yet if we didn't move, we'd starve. Morning came with a thin, pale sun, Jason's face was gray, his lips cracked and bleeding. "We climb today," he said flatly, "or we die up here." I nodded, though my arms felt like lead. The first few meters were the worst. Every muscle screamed, but we forced ourselves to keep moving. Halfway down, the wind picked up again. Not as fierce as during the storm, but enough to make the tower sway slightly. Each sway made the rungs creak under our weight. Jason was ahead of me. I kept my eyes locked on his boots, using his movement to guide mine. Then, without warning, his foot slipped. I saw it happen in slow motion, his boot sliding, his hands scrabbling for grip. "Jason!" I shouted, my voice raw. He caught a rung with one hand, dangling, legs kicking wildly. "Pull yourself up!" I screamed. "I can't!" His voice was pure panic. I climbed down 2 rungs, stretching out my arm. My fingers just brushed his wrist, but then the sweat and rain made him slip lower. "Don't let go," I yelled. His eyes locked with mine, wide, terrified, then strangely calm. "I'm sorry," he said, and then he fell. The scream tore itself from my throat as I watched him plummet, his body getting smaller and smaller until it vanished in the grass far below. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound but the wind and my own ragged breathing. I clung to the tower, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't climb down. I couldn't climb up. I just hung there, gripping the steel, whispering his name into the empty air. I don't know how long I stayed there, clutching the rung as if letting go would erase me too. The world below was silent. Jason's absence felt like a hole torn out of reality. My mind started playing tricks on me. I thought I heard his voice, faint, carried by the wind. "Keep going, don't stop." I looked around wildly, but there was no one. Just endless plains, the sun beating down and the tower vibrating under my grip. I almost wanted to let go, to follow him down, to make the pain stop. But then I noticed something. A lone bird, maybe the same hawk that stole our food, perched a few meters below, staring at me. It tilted its head, then flew off in a slow, circling path toward the ground. I don't know why, but something about it made me move. "Okay," I whispered, "one more rung." I climbed down 1 rung, then another. Each movement was agony, my body screaming for water, for food, for rest. But the thought of lying down and giving up felt worse. I didn't look down. I just followed the rungs, step after step, like a prayer. At some point, I started talking out loud, to Jason, to God, to anyone who might hear. "Don't let me die here, please, please." The sun burned my neck, the wind dried my throat, but I kept going. Something or someone wanted me to survive, and that thought lit a small spark inside me, just enough to keep my hands moving. When my boots finally touched the ground, my legs buckled. I collapsed to my knees, clutching the dirt like it was the most precious thing in the world. For a moment I just knelt there, breathing hard, feeling the earth under my fingers. But then the reality hit me. Jason's body. I forced myself to look. He lay in the grass a few meters away, unnaturally still, his arm twisted at an impossible angle. My throat tightened. I crawled to him, my vision blurring, and laid a hand on his shoulder. "Jason?" I whispered. No response. I stayed there for a long time, the silence louder than any storm we'd survived. Finally, I closed his eyes, muttered a prayer I barely remembered from childhood, and stood up. If I stayed too long, I'd die too, and Jason's death would mean nothing. But I was dangerously weak. My lips were cracked, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I staggered forward, scanning the horizon. Somewhere out there had to be water. A ditch, a cattle trough, anything. Each step was a battle. The plains shimmered with heat, making mirages dance in the distance. Once I thought I saw a stream, but when I reached it, it was just a dry gully. My head pounded, my chest heaved. I dropped to my knees, the world spinning. This is it, I thought. This is where I die. And then, just as darkness crept in, I heard it, the faint trickle of water. At first, I thought it was just another hallucination, a cruel trick of my dying mind. But the sound grew louder, real enough to pull me forward. I crawled toward it, my knees scraping against the dry grass, my fingers digging into the dirt. And then I saw it, a narrow stream, glinting in the fading sunlight. I almost wept. I dragged myself to the edge, plunged my hands into the cold water, and drank like an animal. The taste was metallic, muddy, and the sweetest thing I had ever known. I drank until my stomach ached, then splashed water on my face, cooling the fire burning inside my skull. Lying there half in the stream, I felt life trickle back into me. My heart slowed, my breathing steadied. For the first time since Jason fell, I felt something other than fear, gratitude. I looked up at the sky, streaked with red and gold from the sunset. "Thank you," I whispered. Maybe it was to God, maybe to Jason, maybe to both. But I felt heard. The plains were still, as if holding their breath, and for a moment I knew I wasn't alone. I stayed by the stream through the night, drinking small sips whenever I woke. By dawn, my strength had returned just enough to stand. The tower loomed far behind me now, its silhouette black against the horizon. I didn't look back for long. I couldn't. Step by step, I started walking. Every muscle ached, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, baking the earth, but I kept going. I followed the stream for as long as I could, hoping it would lead me to a farm, a road, something. Then, in the distance, I saw a shape moving. For a moment, I thought it was another hallucination. But as I got closer, I realized it was real. A pickup truck parked near a fence line, 2 men checking cattle nearby. I stumbled toward them, shouting with what little voice I had left. "Help, please!" One of them turned, froze, then started running toward me. By the time he reached me, my knees gave out. "You're okay, buddy, we got you," he said, catching me before I hit the ground. They gave me water, loaded me into the truck, and drove me toward the nearest town. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the tower disappeared from sight. Jason was gone, but I was alive. It took days before my body fully recovered, but the harder part was facing the silence inside me, the weight of Jason's absence. When I finally sat down in front of a camera to tell my story, my hands trembled. "I wasn't supposed to make it," I said quietly. "The tower should have killed us both. And Jason," my voice cracked, "he didn't make it." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to go on. "I saw him fall. I thought I'd follow him, but someone wouldn't let me quit. I heard Jason's voice in the wind. I saw a bird lead me downward, and when I was dying of thirst, I heard water before I even knew where to crawl." I looked straight into the camera. You can call it luck if you want, but I know what I saw. God was there. On that tower, in that storm, in that stream, he kept me alive. Not because I deserved it, but because there's a reason I'm still here. I closed my eyes, took a shaky breath, and whispered, "Jason, I made it. I'll live the rest of my life for the both of us." The video ended with the image of the tower, far away against the prairie sky. Silent, waiting. But it hadn't won. I had survived.